Usually when we talk about learning a new skill, there's this expectation of just straightforward logic.
Right. Like it's supposed to be highly predictable.
Exactly. It's supposed to be like math. You
Right.
memorize the formula, you plug in the numbers, and the result just pops out on the other side. It's binary. Clean.
Yeah. But when you step into the world of English fluency, that neat little math equation just completely
It
shatters.
really does. I mean, millions of people are utterly exhausted trying to apply like rigid logic to a language that is inherently organic
Mhm.
and honestly kind of chaotic.
Oh, totally chaotic. And it creates this massive cognitive disconnect. We want a clear rule book that says, if A, then B. But human communication operates way closer to jazz music than it does to algebra.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and when you try to force a mathematical structure onto spontaneous conversation, the result is just the absolute definition of mental fatigue.
It just wipes you out. And,
Yeah.
if you are listening to this right now, you are probably an English learner, or maybe you use English daily for work, and you are intimately familiar with the #1 barrier to true fluency.
The absolute biggest wall standing between you and sounding completely natural.
Right. And that is translating in your head. So today, our mission is to fire the middleman in your brain that is causing all this exhaustion.
It's time to let them go.
Seriously. We have synthesized a really fascinating stack of source material for this deep dive. We've got a breakdown from a popular language education channel, Thomas and Grace. We've got a really comprehensive 90-day brain training methodology focused on effortless English by AJ, and a 4-step cognitive framework from an expert teacher named Tafani.
It's a really solid stack of research.
It is. And our goal here, to build you a simple, highly effective, step-by-step daily routine to train your brain to think directly in English.
But, before we get into the mechanics of this routine, we really have to establish a core philosophy for you, the listener, because there's just a lot of guilt associated with language learning.
Oh, so much guilt.
Right. If you are constantly translating in your head or stumbling over your words or just feeling a step behind in conversations, I need you to understand this. Your brain is not broken.
Yeah, you are not inherently bad at languages.
Exactly. Your brain is simply wired inefficiently for this specific task, and it is almost entirely because of how traditional schooling trained you to process information. We are going to use neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, to completely remap how you process English.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can build this shiny new daily routine, you really have to understand exactly why your current process is so incredibly draining.
We need to look at what is physically happening in your neural circuitry when you translate.
Let's diagnose the problem. It comes down to, comparing the cognitive load of a 4-step mental process against a 0-step process, right?
That's exactly it. Right now, most adult learners use this highly inefficient 4-step process. Step 1, you hear the English sentence.
Okay, sounds easy enough.
Right, but step 2, your brain immediately switches gears and translates that sentence into your native language just to grasp the meaning.
Yeah.
Then step 3, you formulate your response, but you formulate it in your native language. And finally, step 4. You translate that response back into English, mentally scan your internal grammar charts to make sure you aren't making a mistake, and then you finally speak.
Just hearing you list those steps out loud makes me feel tired. I mean, that is a staggering amount of data processing happening in milliseconds.
It really is.
You are basically routing a signal through a server in another country just to talk to someone standing in the exact same room.
That is a very accurate way to visualize it. You are adding massive latency to the connection. But by contrast, native speakers use a 0-step process.
0-step.
0. When someone speaks to them, they don't analyze the grammar, they don't translate the concept, they don't, search a mental database for vocabulary. They just speak. The concepts are mapped directly to the words. The brain already knows the shape of the sentence before the mouth even opens.
The sources use this concept of the middleman, and I just think it perfectly encapsulates the frustration. Your native language is the middleman.
Yes.
In business, a middleman just slows down the transaction and takes a cut of your profits.
Yes.
Right? In language, your native language slows down the communication and takes a massive cut of your confidence, your timing, your personality.
By the time you've consulted the middleman and run through all 4 steps, the conversation has completely moved on without you.
Exactly. You're left holding this perfectly grammatical sentence that is just no longer relevant.
And this raises an important question. Why do millions of highly intelligent, capable adults automatically default to this exhausting four-step process.
Yeah, why do we build the middleman into the system in the first place?
It goes back to that educational trauma we touched on a moment ago. Schools taught you to analyze English, not to use it.
Right, like an academic subject.
Precisely. They handed you vocabulary lists to memorize out of context. They gave you conjugation charts. They graded you on translation exercises. And most destructively, they punished every single mistake with a red pen.
So they were teaching English the exact same way you teach a history class or like a biology class. Memorize these discrete facts and regurgitate them on a multiple choice test.
Which is terrible for language acquisition. They trained your brain to believe that English is a puzzle to be solved. So your brain learned a very specific neurological pattern.
Which is?
To produce English, I must first generate the thought in my native language, cross-reference it against the rule book, translate the vocabulary, and then output. Over 10 or 15 years of schooling, that specific pattern was activated thousands of times.
Wow. Thousands of times.
Right. Biologically, your brain coded that specific neural pathway in myelin.
Myelin, that's the fatty substance that insulates nerves.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. It insulates the nerves and makes signals travel faster. That four-step translation process isn't just a bad habit. It is thick, deeply insulated neural circuitry. It is literal muscle memory.
I mean, if the neural circuitry is that thick, it explains why it's so incredibly hard to break. But I have to ask, if we logically know, and the listener logically knows, that translating is agonizingly inefficient, why does the brain stubbornly insist on doing it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Why does the brain literally panic and run back to the native language the very second an English conversation gets slightly complex or, emotional? We know it doesn't work, yet we cling to it.
Because the brain prioritizes safety over efficiency, always. Your native language is your ultimate cognitive safety net. It is the framework you've used to express your intelligence, your humor, your needs since you were an infant.
That makes a lot of sense.
When you are put on the spot in English, or when the conversation gets nuanced, your brain experiences a mild threat response. The amygdala flares up.
Like a fight or flight response.
Essentially, yes. And under stress, the brain abandons the weak, newly forming, unmyelinated English pathway, and it sprints down the strongest, oldest, safest road it knows, your mother tongue.
We really need to acknowledge how incredibly vulnerable it feels to drop that safety net. Telling someone to just stop translating feels like telling them to walk a tightrope without a harness.
It does.
Your native language is how you prove you are smart. Stripping that away leaves you feeling completely exposed.
It is deeply vulnerable. But our mission today is to start paving a new direct road to English and to start myelinating that new circuitry so that it eventually becomes wider and stronger than the old translation pathway. We are going to bypass the middleman completely.
And that brings us to the practical solution. We're going to map out exactly how you should structure your day to build this new circuitry, starting from the very moment you open your eyes. Let's get into the morning routine.
The morning routine is entirely focused on perception and passive input. You are waking the brain up and setting the linguistic environment before the actual stress of the day even begins.
So the very first step of our routine is what the educators from the sources call label your world. And the absolute most critical instruction here is to start incredibly small.
Very small.
Right. Do not wake up and try to construct a perfectly complex, grammatically flawless internal monologue about your career goals for the week. That is way too much cognitive pressure.
And pressure makes you freeze and run to the safety net.
Exactly. Instead, you wake up, look around your bedroom, and literally just label the physical objects you see in English.
It sounds almost overly simplistic, but neurologically, it is highly strategic. You look at your pillow and your inner voice says, pillow. You look at the window and think, window. You look at your coffee and think,
Thing.
yes. You are engaging the visual cortex and mapping it directly to the English phones.
But let me pause you there, because I think the immediate instinct for a learner looking at a pillow is to see the pillow. Think the word in their native language, say almohada in Spanish, and then mentally translate it to pillow. How do we stop that micro-translation from happening?
By focusing intensely on the physical sensory input. You have to force the direct connection between the visual object and the English word. If the native word pops up, you don't panic, but you actively dismiss it and refocus your eyes on the object while repeating the English word.
Just repeating it.
Right. Pillow, pillow. You are intentionally not building a bridge between the native word and the English word. You are building a bridge between the physical object and the English word. It's just a gentle, low-stakes challenge to start the day.
It's like a low-stress warm-up for the brain. And you can carry this through your entire morning prep. While you're brushing your teeth, while you're getting dressed, you just narrate the individual nouns and adjectives of your morning. Water, cold, mirror, shirt, tired.
Exactly.
Now, moving past those single words, our sources dive heavily into something Tafani calls perception. If labeling is about vocabulary, what is the role of perception in this morning routine?
Perception is about tuning your brain's auditory processing center. Before you can think in English automatically, your brain simply needs to stop treating English sounds as foreign data.
What do you mean by foreign data?
Well, every language has a unique rhythm, unique stress patterns, a unique cadence. If your brain is constantly expecting the rhythm and frequency of your native language, English will always feel jarring.
Ah, I see.
And that jarring feeling is what triggers the translation pause. Your brain stops the incoming signal to decode the weird rhythm.
So how do we train the brain's perception practically? Like while we are, say, making breakfast or getting ready for work?
You have to alter your digital and physical environment to make English your default language. This is an actionable step you should take right now. Go into your phone settings, your computer operating system, your social media accounts, and switch the default language to English.
Just plunge right in.
Yes. Then, while you are making breakfast, put on an English podcast or a YouTube video in the background. And here is a fascinating recommendation from the teaching framework. Play it at a slightly faster speed, like 1.25x.
Wait, I have to challenge that.
I know, it sounds crazy.
It does. If I am an English learner and I'm already struggling to understand native speakers at normal speed, why on earth would I speed the audio up? That sounds incredibly frustrating. Wouldn't that just cause the brain to shut down completely?
It seems totally counterintuitive, I agree, but it relies on cognitive load theory. When you speed the audio up to 1.25x, you actually strip away the brain's ability to isolate individual vocabulary words.
It says it's too fast?
Exactly. The spaces between the words shrink. Because your brain can no longer catch every single word to translate it, it is forced to surrender. The analytical translating part of the brain just gives up, and the auditory processing center takes over to simply listen to the melody, the intonation, and the rhythm of the sentence as a whole block of sound.
Oh, wow. That is brilliant. So you are intentionally overwhelming the middleman. You are giving the translation pathway so much data so fast that it just throws its hands up and walks away.
Yes.
And what's left is just pure exposure to the rhythm.
Exactly. You aren't trying to understand the podcast perfectly. You are training your brain to expect the speed and cadence of natural native speech. So when you do encounter English at a normal speed later in the day, it suddenly feels spacious and manageable. The perception gap closes.
Okay, so we've labeled our coffee, our phone is in English, we've got a slightly sped up podcast playing while we get dressed. That leads us right into the core of the morning commute. This comes straight from AJ's brain training methodology, which heavily emphasizes something called comprehensible input. Tell me about this deep listening phase.
This is where we start laying down that new myelin we talked about earlier, but in a very structured way.
Yeah.
For 30 to 45 minutes every morning, which is, perfect for a commute on the train or a morning walk, you are going to listen to a single short audio lesson, specifically a mini story.
The story.
Right. We are talking about an audio track that is only 3 to 5 minutes long.
Okay, a 3-minute story. That seems highly manageable.
The length is manageable, sure, but the parameters are incredibly strict. There are absolute unbreakable rules for this phase.
Okay, lay them on me.
First, you must listen to that exact same 3-minute story 7 or more times a day. Second, you must do this for 7 days straight before you are allowed to move on to a new story.
Wow. Okay.
And third, and this is crucial, absolutely no reading the text while you listen. Ears only.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but also where I anticipate the most friction from listeners. Listening to the exact same 3-minute audio track 50 times in a single week, that sounds agonizingly repetitive.
It is repetitive by design.
But doesn't boredom kill neuroplasticity? I mean, if I understand the meaning in the story by Tuesday and I have to keep listening to it on Thursday and Friday, my brain is just going to tune it out as background noise. Why is this intense, specific repetition so vital?
What's fascinating here is that we often confuse short-term memory with neurological habit. If you listen to a story once or twice and you know all the vocabulary, yes, you understand the meaning. Your short-term memory has successfully decoded the information.
Right, I've got the gist.
But understanding a concept is not the same thing as building an automatic neural pathway. Your brain hasn't coded that pathway in myelin yet. Deep repetition is the only biological mechanism that convinces your subconscious brain that this information is so vital it no longer needs to be translated.
Oh, I see if I'm tracking the logic here. If I just understand it, it stays in the analytical, conscious part of my brain.
Hmm.
But if I want to speak without thinking, it has to move down into the subconscious autonomic nervous system, like breathing or riding a bike.
Precisely.
Hmm.
The methodology uses a brilliant analogy here regarding pattern recognition. Think about how you recognize the face of a close family member or a best friend. When you see your friend, you don't consciously analyze their features. You don't look at them and say, okay, the distance between the eyes is this much, plus a specific nose shape, plus that jawline. Therefore, calculating the data, that is Maria.
Right, you just instantly know it's Maria. The recognition is instantaneous and holistic. You process the whole face at once.
Yes. And bypassing translation requires this exact level of saturation with language. When you hear the same English phrases 50 times in a week, your brain stops analyzing the grammar, it stops translating the vocabulary, it just accepts the phrase as a holistic block of meaning.
Like recognizing a face.
Exactly. It starts recognizing the linguistic patterns instantly. The meaning becomes completely automatic.
There's actually a really compelling anecdote in the source material about this. They followed a student named Hadi, an engineer from Iran.
Oh, the Hadi story is great.
Yeah, Hadi was the classic victim of the traditional school system. He had studied textbooks for years, he could read advanced engineering manuals perfectly, but he literally could not speak in a meeting without freezing and translating every single word. He felt completely incompetent.
Which is so common.
Right. So he started this deep listening process, fighting through the boredom, just flooding his brain with intense, repetitive, comprehensible audio. And the result? He rewired his brain entirely. He now works as a mechanical engineer in an international firm using English every single day, completely automatically. The repetition carved a brand new highway in his brain.
It is incredibly powerful when applied consistently, but I want to circle back to your point about boredom because it is a valid obstacle. The key to not tuning it out is to listen for different layers each day.
Different layers.
Yeah. So on Monday, you listen for the raw meaning. On Wednesday, you focus entirely on the intonation, how the speaker's voice goes up or down. On Friday, you listen specifically for how the speaker connects words together, where they drop consonants. You are constantly giving the brain a new micro-task within the same audio.
That is a great strategy to keep the brain engaged.
Yeah.
And we need to reiterate that rule about not reading the text. Why is having the transcript in front of you such a cardinal sin during this phase?
Because reading is a visual, analytical task that is deeply tied to your translation habit. If you have the text in front of you, your eyes will always dominate your ears.
Always.
Your brain will process the written text using its established, highly myelinated translation pathways. You will literally be training your eyes to translate, not training your ears to perceive. You have to force the auditory processing center to do the heavy lifting alone.
Okay, so that is our morning. We wake up and start small by tagging our visual environment with English nouns. We train our perception by changing our digital settings and letting slightly sped up English wash over us. And we do 30 to 45 minutes of deep, highly repetitive listening to a single mini story using only our ears. That is a robust, solid foundation for the day.
It sets the baseline. But we can't stop there. We've saturated the brain with rhythm and input in the morning, but listening is still passive. As the day progresses, the challenge shifts.
Right.
You have to bridge the gap from single words to flowing thoughts. You have to transition from passive input to active integration.
Which brings us perfectly into the afternoon routine. The afternoon is about keeping the flow and consciously building your internal monologue.
This is where we introduce the concept of the inner narrator. We want to take those isolated morning words, coffee, car, tired, and start stringing them into simple, connected actions.
The video transcripts from Thomas and Grace frame this so beautifully. They suggest acting as if you are the star, the director, and the narrator of a documentary film called My Life in English.
I love that framing.
Yeah, so it's 2 p.m., you are getting up from your desk to get a snack, and you just narrate your reality to yourself in your head. I'm walking to the kitchen, I'm a little hungry this afternoon, I really don't want to finish that spreadsheet.
In linguistic psychology, this technique is known as self-talk, and it is incredibly effective for adult learners because it completely bypasses the affective filter.
The affective filter, that's the anxiety and stress barrier that pops up when we try to speak to a native speaker, right?
Exactly. When you are talking to someone else, your brain is terrified of making a mistake, looking foolish, or being misunderstood. That anxiety thickens the filter, and language cannot flow through it?
It just blocks everything.
Right. But with internal self-talk, the effective filter is non-existent. There is zero pressure. No one is listening. No one is judging your preposition usage. You are in a perfectly safe psychological environment to practice connecting your physical actions to English phrasing.
But let's look at a real-world roadblock here. What happens when the inner narrator gets stuck? Let's say I'm narrating my life and I want to think, I'm looking for the remote control, but I suddenly realize I don't know the English word for remote control. The immediate, overwhelming instinct is to stop the narration, pull out my phone, and open a translation app.
And that instinct is exactly the trap we have to avoid. Reaching for the translation app instantly pulls you out of the English neural network and drops you right back into the native language safety net.
It breaks the immersion.
Totally. This connects perfectly to the comprehension step in Tafani's expert framework. Advanced communicators train themselves to operate entirely within the linguistic tools they already possess. If you forget a word, you must not stop the flow to translate. Instead, you use circumlocution.
Circumlocution. So, cocking around the word.
Yes. You describe the missing concept using the English words you do know.
Ah, okay. So instead of stopping everything to look up remote control,
Right.
you just navigate around the hole. You think, where's the small plastic thing I used to change the TV channel?
Exactly. That is a highly advanced communicative skill. Native speakers do it all the time when they have a brain freeze. They say, hand me the thing for the television. It keeps you operating entirely within the English cognitive framework. You maintain the flow.
But what if it's a word I absolutely must learn? What if I'm preparing for a meeting and I need a specific technical term? I can't just describe things forever.
If you absolutely must look a word up because it's vital for your job or your day, the rule is draconian. You must use an English-to-English dictionary.
No bilingual dictionaries whatsoever.
None, because a bilingual dictionary reinforces the middleman. It says, this English word equals this Spanish word. But when you read a definition in an English-to-English dictionary, you are forcing your brain to comprehend the new concept by connecting it to a web of other English words you already know.
You keep it all in the same network.
Right. You are weaving the new word into your existing English neural net rather than anchoring it back to your native language.
Speaking of anchoring, I want to highlight a technique for the afternoon that I found profoundly insightful in the sources. It's the idea of thinking in pictures, not in text. One of the educators pointed out that when a human baby learns the word apple, they do not learn that apple is a translation of some other word. They don't learn text at all.
Right. A toddler learns that the auditory sound apple is firmly attached to a red, round, sweet, crunchy object. The visual image, the physical weight, the sensory experience, that all comes first. The word is simply a phonetic label plastered onto a rich, multisensory concept.
But as adult language learners, we completely abandon that natural process. We rely heavily on text. We buy a notebook, we write down a new English vocabulary word on the left side of the page, and right next to it, we write the translation in our native language on the right side.
It's terrible.
We are literally training our visual cortex to associate the new English word with the old native text rather than with the actual real-world concept.
It's a self-sabotaging snuddy habit.
Yeah.
You are manually hardwiring the middleman into your brain every time you write a flashcard like that. If you want to think directly in English, you have to break that textual association on the page.
Let's actually walk the listener through a mental exercise right now to demonstrate how to do this properly. Listener, I want you to imagine you are trying to learn the word lemon. If you use the old method, you write lemon equals, your native word. But instead, try this. Close your eyes. Picture a bright, textured yellow skin.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Imagine holding it. It's firm, slightly cold. Now imagine taking a knife and slicing it open. You see the juices. Now imagine taking a bite. Feel that sharp, acidic, sour reaction in the back of your jaw. Your mouth is probably watering a little bit right now just thinking about it.
It actually is.
Now take that intense, physical, multisensory reaction and attach the sound lemon directly to it.
That is a perfect demonstration because human memory is inherently visual and spatial. We are evolutionarily designed to remember images, locations, and physical feelings significantly better than abstract text.
Wow, yes.
When you anchor an English word to a visceral feeling or a vivid picture, you bypass the translation center of your brain entirely. The word becomes a real, living, breathing concept in your mind, not a math equation to be decoded.
The sources gave a beautiful example for abstract words, too. If you're trying to learn a complex word like melancholy, do not write melancholy equals sadness in your language. That flattens the meaning. Instead, draw a little sketch next to the word.
Yeah, visual aids are huge.
Or close your eyes and vividly imagine a gray, rainy afternoon in late November, sitting alone by a cold window, watching the rain, feeling a little quiet and reflective. Connect the word melancholy to that specific visual and emotional atmosphere.
So what does this all mean? It means we need to stop treating English like a decryption task and start treating it as a physiological and emotional experience. And that logic applies perfectly to the biggest afternoon trap of all idioms.
Oh, idioms. The absolute bane of every language learner's existence. They are the ultimate proof that language isn't math.
Because they actively defy logical translation. An idiom is a phrase where the meaning of the individual words has absolutely nothing to do with the meaning of the entire phrase. If you try to translate "it's raining cats and dogs" word for word into your native language, you're going to picture farm animals plummeting from the sky.
Which is terrifying.
It is nonsensical, and depending on your culture, deeply confusing.
So how do we process idioms if we aren't allowed to translate them to figure out what they mean?
By learning the atmospheric feeling of the phrase, just like we did with the word melancholy. When a native speaker hears "raining cats and dogs," they do not visualize animals for even a millisecond. The phrase instantly evokes a feeling.
Right.
They feel the sensation of heavy rain, of getting wet, of needing an umbrella, of chaotic weather. You have to bypass the literal words and map the phrase directly to the atmospheric response. Let's look at another one. Under the weather.
Okay, yeah. If you put under and weather into a translation app, you get a spatial location relative to a meteorological event.
Yeah.
It's completely meaningless data.
Exactly. But if you connect it to a physical feeling, it clicks. Under the weather should instantly evoke a slight headache, a bit of fatigue, a scratchy throat, the desire to stay in bed and drink hot tea. You attach the English phrase directly to that physical sensation of mild illness.
So the next time you wake up feeling that specific way, the phrase under the weather bubbles up organically, without a middleman, because the physical feeling triggered the phrase. Let's do one more, just to really drive the pattern home. What about bite the bullet? If you translate that literally, you sound like you're giving someone terrible dental advice.
Bite the bullet is a great example. It shouldn't evoke the image of a piece of metal. It should evoke the feeling of dread followed by grim determination. It's that feeling in your stomach when you have to make a phone call you really don't want to make, but you just take a deep breath and dial the number anyway. That feeling is the phrase, bite the bullet.
Okay, this afternoon routine is brilliant, and it is entirely focused on building a web of meaning. We are narrating our lives to lower the affective filter. We are navigating around missing vocabulary with descriptions. We are using English-to-English dictionaries, and we are attaching new words and idioms to visceral pictures and feelings instead of native text. This is a massive cognitive shift,
It really is.
and it prepares us perfectly for the evening routine. Because up until now, we've mostly been working inside our own heads. The evening is where things get active. We are transitioning from internal thought to external production. We are getting ready to face the real world.
The evening routine is focused heavily on formulation and reaction times. You've absorbed the language all day, you've connected it to your reality. Now you have to train the physical muscles of your mouth and push your brain's processing speed.
Step one of the evening routine is a technique the educators call thinking with questions. As you wind down your day, you intentionally ask yourself simple questions in your head, like, what did I have for lunch today? Or what do I need to pack in my bag for tomorrow morning? Why is framing it as a question so much more effective than just narrating?
Because it leverages a psychological phenomenon similar to the Zeigarnik effect.
Oh, what's that?
Well, human brains despise unresolved loops. You cannot comfortably leave a question unanswered. If I ask you a question, your brain automatically, almost compulsively, fires up its search engines to find the answer. By posing a question to yourself in English, you are gently tricking your brain into formulating a concrete response in English. It forces a cognitive output.
It jumpstarts the thinking engine. But as you said, we can't just keep it in our internal monologue forever. Eventually, we have to open our mouths and move air past our vocal cords. And that brings us to the out loud practice.
This is a crucial step.
AJ's 90-day brain training methodology introduces a high-intensity technique called listen and answer stories. This is specifically utilized in weeks 9 through 12 of the program. How does this work mechanically?
This is arguably the most active, intense part of the entire routine. You listen to a simple, slightly goofy story on audio, but unlike the morning commute where you just listen passively, here, after every single sentence, the narrator pauses and asks a question about the sentence you just heard. And you, the listener, must answer that question out loud immediately before the narrator speaks again.
Give me a practical example of how that audio track sounds.
So the audio will say, Maria went to the supermarket. Then the audio immediately asks, where did Maria go? You have roughly 2 seconds to immediately shout out loud, to the supermarket, or Maria went to the supermarket.
Oh, wow. Fast.
Very fast. Then the audio confirms the answer and asks another question. Did Maria go to the bank? And you say no, to the supermarket. You do this rapid fire for 20 to 30 minutes.
I have to admit, that sounds almost, I don't know, too easy, like a children's game or a very basic introductory class. If I'm an intermediate learner, why am I answering questions about Maria going to the supermarket?
Because we are not testing your vocabulary level here. We are training your neurological reaction time. We're trying to bypass the frontal lobe's analytical processing.
Okay, I see.
By forcing you to answer out loud immediately, within a 2-second window, there is literally no time for your brain to grab the incoming English, route it through your native language, translate an answer, check the grammar, and translate it back. The time pressure forces the brain to bypass the middleman entirely. You are repeatedly drilling the direct pathway. Hear English, understand English, speak English.
So the simplicity of the vocabulary is actually the point. Because the words are easy, the brain doesn't get hung up on meaning, it just practices speed.
Exactly. Over weeks of this rapid-fire practice, the hesitation disappears. The brain learns that it can trust the English pathway.
There is another student example in the methodology guide that highlights this beautifully. A guy named Ayman. He had studied English for years, knew all the advanced vocabulary, but when it came time to speak, he would freeze, stammer, and translate everything.
Very typical.
Right, so he committed to this listen and answer method. He did the rapid-fire audio practice every single evening. And the result wasn't that he learned new words. The result was that his reaction time plummeted. He now runs his own business, negotiating and speaking entirely in English automatically. The speed drills unlock the vocabulary he already had trapped behind the middleman.
It clearly works for output speed.
But wait, let me push back on something monumental that we have completely ignored so far. What about grammar? We haven't talked about grammar rules at all. Surely I can't just speak purely on instinct and reaction speed. I need to know the rules so I don't sound uneducated, right? If I don't study verb conjugations, won't I just be shouting broken English?
This is going to sound radical to anyone raised in a traditional school system, but explicit grammar study is exactly what we want you to avoid.
Wait, really? Avoid it?
Yes. Let's look at another technique from the brain training program utilized in weeks 5 through 8. It uses something called point of view stories to build what they call grammatical intuition.
Okay, grammatical intuition. What does that mean? And how do we acquire it without looking at a textbook?
We acquire it through implicit memory rather than explicit memory. A point of view story works like this. You listen to a story told in the present tense. John walks to the store. He buys a coffee. He is happy.
Okay.
You listen to that story multiple times until you deeply understand it. Then the narrator tells the exact same story with the exact same vocabulary, but changes the perspective to the past. Yesterday, John walked to the store. He bought a coffee. He was happy. Then you hear it again from the future perspective. Next year, John will walk to the store.
Oh, I see the matrix here. The vocabulary remains constant. The narrative arc remains constant. The only variable that changes is the grammatical time frame.
Precisely. And by hearing these subtle variations 50 times over a week, your subconscious pattern recognition software goes to work. It automatically maps the changes.
Just naturally.
Yes. It learns intuitively that when the context is yesterday, the sound walk transforms into walked, and buy shifts to bought. You never looked at a conjugation chart. You never memorized the definition of a past participle. You never stressed over irregular verbs. You just repeatedly absorbed how the language morphs in different contexts.
You learn it the exact same way a native-speaking 5-year-old learns it. A child doesn't know what a past tense verb is. But if you say, yesterday I run to the park, the child will immediately say, no, you ran. They don't know the rule. They just feel that run sounds wrong.
Exactly. You are developing an ear for what sounds right. When you speak, you aren't calculating formulas. You are relying on an intuitive feeling.
That is so incredibly freeing for anyone who has ever cried over a textbook of English verb tenses. We are bypassing the analytical brain entirely. Now, as we round out the evening routine, the expert framework from Tiffany adds a really fascinating psychological layer to this output phase. She talks about decision-making and developing an English personality. What exactly does she mean by an English personality?
This touches on the field of sociolinguistics. Language is not just a collection of words. It is a vehicle for culture. How you complain to a manager, how you deliver a joke, how you politely disagree with a colleague. These behaviors are deeply culturally specific.
Oh, absolutely.
If you try to translate a polite disagreement from your native culture directly into English words, it might land terribly. Depending on where you are from, a direct translation of your native politeness might sound incredibly passive-aggressive to an American, or conversely, it might sound wildly aggressive and rude to a Brit.
This is a huge realization. It's not just about translating words. We are constantly trying to translate our native cultural behaviors, which is a massive trap.
Exactly. Tiffany suggests spending time in the evening practicing imaginary scenarios out loud alone in your room. Imagine you are at a job interview, or you are returning a defective laptop to a store. Practice how a native English speaker would handle the interaction.
Like role-playing.
Yes, you actually need to cultivate a slightly different persona, an English personality, that intentionally adopts the directness, the humor, the intonation, and the social pacing of the English-speaking world.
That is a wild concept. You are essentially telling the listener to take an acting class. You want them to role play, but I can see how powerful that is. By actively adopting a persona, you give yourself permission to step entirely outside of your native communication style. You aren't you speaking broken English. You are an English speaker handling a situation. It's a psychological hack to bypass the middleman.
If we connect all of this to a bigger picture, think about our critique of traditional education again. Imagine you want to learn how to use a completely new, highly complex software program. Traditional education sits you at a desk and makes you read a 500-page manual about the code structure. You memorize the names of all the menus. You take a written test on what the keyboard shortcuts theoretically do.
But you never actually touch a computer.
Right. And when someone finally puts you in front of the actual software on a real computer, you completely freeze. Because knowing the theory of the code doesn't mean you have the muscle memory to navigate the interface.
That makes total sense.
This entire daily routine, the visual labeling in the morning, the deep repetitive listening, the afternoon narrating, the rapid-fire answering, the imaginary role-playing, this is putting your hands on the keyboard. You are beta testing the software live. You will click the wrong buttons, you will cause errors, but your brain will intuitively learn to navigate the interface through physical experience without ever needing to consult the manual.
That software analogy is perfect. And knowing that you are going to click the wrong buttons and cause errors brings us to a crucial pivot in our deep dive. We're moving into our final section, common mistakes, timelines, and signs of progress. Because now that you, the listener, have this incredibly robust, psychologically grounded daily routine, we need to warn you about the hidden malware that will absolutely crash your system if you aren't careful. Let's talk about the traps.
The first, and arguably the most destructive piece of malware in the language learning brain, is perfectionism.
Yes, the desperate need to be flawless from day one. In the educational transcripts, they compared perfectionism to trying to sprint in a race while constantly looking down at your feet to analyze the exact angle of every single footstep.
It's a terrible strategy.
Right. If you do that, you aren't going to run faster. You're going to trip over your own feet and smash your face into the track.
When you strive for perfect grammar in your internal monologue or during your rapid-fire exercises, you activate your inner critic. And here is the danger. Your inner critic almost exclusively speaks your native language.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
It's true. The moment you judge yourself, the middleman is back in the room, stopping the flow. The mantra you must adopt for this entire process is progress over perfection. The immediate goal is communication and flow. You can refine the grammatical nuances later through more input. Right now, you just need the words to move from your brain to your mouth without stopping at the native language toll booth.
Mistake number 2. Reading while listening. We touched on this during the morning routine, but it is so deeply ingrained in learners that it bears repeating. Why is the transcript your enemy?
Because it completely short-circuits the perception phase. Human brains are highly visual. If you have text in front of you, your visual cortex will hijack the processing power. Because you spent 15 years in school translating written text, your brain will automatically route that visual data through your established translation pathways. You must force your auditory processing center to do the heavy lifting alone. The ears must become dominant.
Mistake number 3, studying explicit grammar on the side. This one is going to be incredibly hard for people to let go of. It feels like telling a student to throw away their textbooks.
It feels wildly counterintuitive, I know. But the brain training methodology is very clear about this. If you spend your morning doing intuitive subconscious listening, but then you spend an hour in the evening doing explicit grammar workbook exercises, filling in the blanks with past participles, you actively cancel out your progress.
That's crazy.
Explicit grammar study trains the analytical translating part of your brain. It reinforces the exact mathematical rulebook mentality we are trying to destroy. You are literally feeding the middleman you were trying to starve. You have to trust the intuitive implicit process for the full 90 days.
And mistake number 4, which honestly breaks my heart because I see so many brilliant, capable learners do this.
Yeah.
Waiting for perfection before outputting. It's the fallacy of saying, I will start speaking and narrating my life when I reach an advanced C1 level. Until then, I'm just going to study.
It is a biological and logical impossibility. You cannot reach an advanced level of output without actually outputting. It's like saying you won't start lifting weights until you are already strong.
Right. You don't stand on the edge of the pool, read a textbook on fluid dynamics and the theory of the butterfly stroke, and wait until you are an Olympic-level swimmer before you finally dip your toe in the water. You jump in the shallow end, you splash around, you swallow some water, and you start kicking. You have to get in the cognitive water with the limited vocabulary you have today.
Exactly. Start with what you have. Use circumlocution. Build the flow.
Okay, so let's project into the future. A listener commits to this. They jump in the water. They wake up and label their coffee. They change their phone settings. They listen 50 times to a mini story about Maria going to the supermarket. They narrate their commute. They describe objects they don't know the words for. They attach idioms to physical feelings. They do rapid-fire audio drills. What is the realistic timeline here? When does the exhaustion fade? When do they get to reap the rewards of this rewiring?
Consistency is obviously the main variable, but neurologically speaking, if you follow this routine daily, you will begin to notice a tangible shift in about 4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks. That is surprisingly fast for a biological rewiring.
It is. Now, to be clear, you won't be perfectly, flawlessly fluent in 6 weeks, but what happens is, as the educators describe it, little windows start to open.
Windows.
Yes. You'll be in the middle of a meeting or chatting with a barista, and for a fleeting sentence or two, you will realize after the fact that you just spoke without translating. The middleman just vanished for a 3-second window. It will feel surprising. As you continue, those 3-second windows become 30-second windows, then 5-minute windows. The full transformation, where thinking in English becomes your default autonomic mode of operation, takes about 90 days of dedicated daily practice.
And what are the specific milestones? How does a learner self-assess to know they are actually making progress during those 90 days? The source materials listed 4 really distinct, measurable signs of progress. Let's walk through them.
Sign number 1 is a drastic reduction in your reaction time, specifically regarding humor. You'll be watching a movie, or someone will tell a joke in English, and you will laugh instantly, along with the native speakers.
Oh, that's huge.
Right. You didn't have to catch the words, translate the punchline into your native language, realize it was funny, and then laugh. The humor landed directly in your emotional center.
Because jokes absolutely die on the operating table of translation. By the time you've translated a pun, it's not funny anymore. If you laugh instantly, the direct pathway is working. What's the second sign?
Dreaming in English. This is a massive, highly celebrated milestone in the language learning community. When your subconscious mind is producing English narrative while you are asleep, when your conscious, analytical brain is completely shut off, it means the language has penetrated deeply into your fundamental neural architecture. It is no longer just a surface-level academic exercise. It has become a part of your internal operating system.
That must be such an incredible, surreal feeling to wake up and realize you were arguing with your boss or ordering a coffee in your dream entirely in English. Sign number 3 is about primacy and visual association.
Yes. It's when the English word beats your native language word to the punch. You are walking down the street, you see an animal running across the park, and the very first word that pops into your head is dog. Not your native word for dog, but dog.
The English word wins the race.
Exactly. It becomes your primary, immediate association with that visual stimulus. The new myelin pathway is officially faster than the old native pathway.
And the final sign, which I think is the ultimate payoff for anyone listening to this deep dive, you simply feel less tired.
Exactly. We started this discussion talking about mental fatigue. Translation is cognitively exhausting. It burns an immense amount of caloric energy in the brain. When you stop translating, when the middleman is fired, speaking English takes significantly less mental energy.
It's like you've been running a marathon while wearing a weighted vest every single time you had a conversation, and suddenly you take the vest off. It just feels like going for a brisk, easy walk. The heavy lifting is gone.
The efficiency returns to the system. You can focus on the relationship you are building with the person you are talking to, rather than focusing on the mechanics of the language itself.
This has been such a dense, profoundly actionable deep dive into the mechanics of the brain. Let's do a rapid-fire recap for everyone listening so you know exactly what your marching orders are for tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, wake up and tag your visual environment. Label your world in single English words. Change your phone and computer settings to English. Listen to a 3-minute mini-story on your commute, ears only, and repeat that exact same story every day for a week.
In the afternoon, become the star and narrator of your own documentary. Use internal self-talk. If you forget a word, use circumlocution to describe it. Do not translate it. Throw away your bilingual dictionary. Stop translating idioms and start attaching them to visceral, physical feelings. Anchor new vocabulary to vivid mental pictures, not native text.
And in the evening, leverage the Zeigarnik effect by asking yourself questions in English. Do rapid-fire listen and answer audio exercises out loud to build reaction speed. And practice your imaginary role-play scenarios to cultivate your cultural English personality.
Above all, progress over perfection. Do not study explicit grammar rules. Fire the middleman. As we wrap up, there is one final, somewhat provocative thought that really stuck with me from synthesizing all this material, especially regarding Tiffany's point about building an English personality.
I know exactly what you're referring to, the deeper psychological implications of this rewiring process.
Right. We often hear the theory, lightly touching on the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, that the language we use shapes how we perceive reality. If you spend 90 days successfully building a brand new direct neural pathway for English, a pathway that actively, intentionally bypasses your native language, your native cultural reactions, and your native conversational pacing, are you simply learning a new communication tool? Or are you actually creating a second, slightly different version of yourself?
It's a heavy question.
It is. When you finally achieve that moment where you are thinking purely in English, reacting instinctively, joking naturally with English cultural cadence, you might just look in the mirror and meet a whole new side of your own personality.
It is a fascinating evolution of the self. You aren't just changing the sounds that come out of your mouth, you are expanding the boundaries of who you are and how you interact with the world.
And suddenly, that murky, exhausting translation process we talked about at the beginning, that messy, broken, exhausting 4-step math equation, it clears up. It's no longer an academic puzzle to force your way through. It becomes a natural, fluid, effortless part of who you are. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We challenge you to wake up tomorrow morning, look at your coffee, and start building that new pathway. We'll catch you on the next one.